Hello everyone. Today I'll be playing and hopefully giving you a tutorial on how to play Mr. Jack Pocket. Mr. Jack Pocket is a favorite game of mine. It's in the Mr. Jack series, where one player is the investigator and one player is Mr. Jack, trying to elude capture by the investigator. Mr. Jack Pocket is actually the pocket version of this series. I mean, as it implies, but it's not just a smaller version. It's got different game mechanisms than the original Mr. Jack, or Mr. Jack in New York, which is another favorite of mine. Now, obviously, this is not the physical copy, which I have, and I am a big fan of the physical copy. But the physical copy is one of my favorite portable games, and it's certainly one of my favorite two-player portable games. It's really more of an abstract game, but it's an abstract game that has a kind of thematic element to it. It's interesting because only in the Pocket version, Mr. Jack Pocket, do they clearly distinguish and make it obvious that the good guy team is Sherlock Holmes. So it's Sherlock Holmes versus Jack the Ripper. So that's pretty cool. The app for the game is pretty bare bones. It's pretty simple. I don't know if they'll end up updating it or not, but it still does the job, and the AI is pretty good. So let's go ahead and start a solo game. The Blitz game is timed, so we'll stay away from that, but we'll start a classic game here. So I'll put it as medium, and now you are able to decide if you want to be Jack the Ripper or if you want to be Sherlock Holmes and Watson and their faithful dog. I think his name is like Pugs. Maybe I'm thinking of, it sounds like the Addams Family character, Pugsley, but he's got like kind of like that kind of name, like a silly dog sounding name. But he's one of the three investigators looking for Jack the Ripper. So again, Mr. Jack Pocket uses very different mechanisms from Mr. Jack or Mr. Jack in New York, but it has a similar feel to it, and they're both designed by Bruno Cathala. And I think they're just great games. A lot of two-player games that are very simple to learn and relatively abstract don't feel that replayable time after time as well as this one does. So it's up there with my favorite two-player games, and it hits off a lot of check marks: fast, two-player, deduction, hidden information, asymmetrical, simple. There's a lot of cool things. So we could be either one, either Mr. Jack, either Sherlock Holmes and his team, or Mr. Jack, and we'll start by being Sherlock Holmes. Start game. Okay. So we show that we're on this side and we're facing the board. And now that clock there showed that it's round 1, and that's round 1 of 8. There are 8 rounds in a game of Mr. Jack Pocket, but the game could end much earlier than that, but that's the absolute limit. The game board is comprised of these 9 city tiles. Now it sets it up for us automatically, but the 3 investigators, the dog, Watson, and Sherlock Holmes will always be in these 3 same positions, but the tiles, the 9 city tiles, which each have a different suspect on them, they'll be placed out randomly. The only thing that you'll do is once you place them out, you'll rotate each of the squares that's next to one of our 3 investigators, so that the walls are facing the investigator. because the way the roads or alleys, as we'll call them alleys, work is that investigators can see down a certain path whenever it's the end of a round. So there's up to 8 rounds. Each round is 4 different actions. First, I pick an action as the investigators, and it has to be one of these 4 actions. Then, Jack the Ripper will play 2 actions in a row, so he'll do the second and third action, picking of the ones left. Then finally, there'll be just 1 action left, and I'll do that remaining one. So it's me, him, me. Or me, him twice, and me. Then on the second round, the even-numbered rounds, Jack the Ripper will start first, then go him, then me twice, then me, him, then me twice, then him, finishing off the round. Each of these 4 actions does a different thing, and when we go to round 2, we flip each of them to their alternate side. Then on the next round after that, round 3, the odd-numbered rounds, after they've each been flipped once, they're randomized by having these chits, these cardboard tokens, are tossed up in the air so that, in round 3, maybe some of the same ones will be there from round 2. Maybe all of them, maybe none of them, or maybe some of each. That way it's not just, you always know which actions you'll have available. So, again, there are 8 total actions, and the game started out randomly with which sides of these 4 tokens they landed on. So let's talk about what the actions do. The action that shows a large portrait of one of the investigators, that moves that investigator, in this case Watson, 1 or 2 spaces. Here's an interesting thing about movement. All of the characters can only move clockwise around the board. They can't move through the board. They can't move counterclockwise. They can only move clockwise if they move. I'll skip this one, come back to it. This action token. The next action token after that, if you use that, it rotates a city tile. One of these 9 tiles can be rotated. And of course, by rotating them, that can change what's visible and what's invisible. Because right now, all 9 characters are invisible because none of my investigators can see into them, and seeing in means that there's a clear path going through. So for instance, if I had an investigator to the right of the city block where the green lady is, then all 3 characters on the bottom would be visible at the end of that round, because the person will be able to see through, and there's a straight alley line that connects. Excuse me, as you can imagine. So, each round is 4 different actions. One player doing 1, and the other player doing 2, the first player doing 1 again. And then after all 4 actions are taken, the investigator, who's me, Sherlock, will say, okay, is Mr. Jack visible or invisible? And then it's automated now because it's AI, but the human player, or the other player who's playing as Jack the Ripper, will have to say whichever one it is, visible or invisible. And depending on what he says, I will therefore flip face down all of the city tiles that couldn't possibly be his. So for instance, if the green lady was visible and I had Watson next to her, seeing down the road that she's on, and when Mr. Jack says at the end of the round, "Oh, Mr. Jack is invisible," then I know the green lady can't really be Mr. Jack because she's visible. So there's that process of elimination, that deduction. So Mr. Jack's goal, he has a couple goals. One is to make it so that I narrow it down as little as possible each time. So, if he could make it so that I'm only seeing one as visible the first round, and he says, "Oh, Mr. Jack is invisible," then it only flip one. That would be a good round for him. But if the opposite is true, if he says, "Oh, Mr. Jack is visible," and there's only one visible, well then Mr. Jack essentially has lost, because now we know who it is because we've eliminated all of them but one. So Mr. Jack's goal is to basically have is that Mr. Jack blends in with the crowd, blends in with whichever side, visible or invisible, has the most. If I narrow it down to one, so that I know who it is, before the game ends, before the end of round 8, then I win. Mr. Jack wins if he survives all 8 rounds and is not narrowed down to just one. Now there's a second way Mr. Jack can win. Up on the top right corner of the screen is the card that's over in Mr. Jack's hand. That's called an alibi card, because when I pick one, it's an alibi, because I know that's not the ones I pick are not Mr. Jack. But the one that he has, that's the one who Mr. Jack is for this game, for this session. So whatever card he has over there, that's who Mr. Jack really is. And it could be any of these 9 characters. So thematically, it's not certain if that makes sense, because, I mean, sorry to stereotype if this is a stereotype, but the bottom middle one with the top hat, isn't that how we always imagined Mr. Jack looked? Isn't that how he's always portrayed? I didn't know he could be any of these other types of people. But you can also imagine that maybe this is the person who is the informant for Mr. Jack, or working for Mr. Jack, or is wearing a disguise or something. I don't know. But unlike Spectre Ops, or Letters from Whitechapel, which is about Jack the Ripper, or Scotland Yard, or any other hidden movement game, this isn't a hidden movement game because we know where all the characters are. But it is a deduction game, because we're trying to figure out which character is really Mr. Jack. But Mr. Jack is trying to obscure that information by making it so that I narrow it down too slowly. Now Mr. Jack has a second way he can win. At the top of the screen, over in Mr. Jack's area, there are six hourglasses. Every time that he ends a round and he's invisible, he gets an hourglass filled. If he gets all 6 filled, then he wins that way too. So instead of ending on round 8, he could end on round 6 if he was invisible each time, even if he didn't survive all 8 rounds yet. So that doesn't seem a lot better than ending on round 8 for him. But, well, it is better by 2, obviously, but also the alibi cards down here that I can pick, they're good for me because they'll tell me who is not Jack the Ripper. It's kind of like receiving one clue card in the game Clue. You know, oh, now you know it's not Mr. Green or whatever, or Professor Plum. Because if I have this alibi card, I know the alibi card that shows the real Jack the Ripper is up here. I know it can't be that. So it's just basic process of elimination. But on these alibi cards, there are also hourglasses. Most of them have 1. I think 1 or 2 have 2. And I believe there's just 1 that has none. So there's still an incentive for Jack to try to get these alibi cards, because in addition to making it so that a round goes by where Mr. Jack is unseen, getting hourglasses that way, he can also get hourglasses by getting alibi cards, which are more useful for me at the beginning because it could narrow down all of them. But later on, they're less useful for me because they might tell me information I already know. If they tell me it's not the green lady, and I already know it's not the green lady, then it doesn't help me except to prevent Mr. Jack from getting that extra hourglass. But let's start with that as our first action. So I'm going to drag this towards me to tell the system I'm selecting the action to get an alibi card. Alright, I got one. And I have the orange guy. So now it's in front of me. So it had an hourglass on it. Oops. Jack the Ripper is doing his activities. He rotated the top one and used the other action to flip these two. So I think I can slow down the animations. I think I forgot to, so you could see more clearly what was going on. But he basically used two types of actions that have to do with moving city tiles. One rotated this one, and it has an X to show that you can't rotate it again because each round you can only rotate a tile once. And then he flipped these two, the one with the green lady. So he's thinking steps ahead. He's thinking in terms of where Watson will move, and on the next round where Sherlock is likely to move, and trying to prevent them from having as much access to seeing inside the city as possible. But I did narrow it down already that it's not the orange guy. So we flipped the tile that used to be here. It's now swapped with the green lady's tile. We flipped it, and it's now face down, but it stays the same orientation when you flip it. So the wall is still facing the outside. On the right, that is. But we denied him an hourglass. So unfortunately, because he played well, he set the stage so that I can't move Watson, said he would make anything visible. So the most Watson can move is 2, 1, 2. So he'll end up here. So I'll do that now. So here's Watson going here, 2. And now it's the end of the round, and we ask, is he visible or invisible? And he says, boom, invisible. Because they were all invisible, because none of them could see. So he got his hourglass, and he already took his first move right away, because he's a computer, so he goes a lot faster than me. And he rotated this one. That was his first action for this round 2. And we see round 2 here as the round 2 clock, showing that on both sides of the screen. Now, this remaining actions to me is to move the dog 1 or 2 spaces, to move Sherlock 1 or 2 spaces, or the third one is a wild one. It's not what you might expect. It's not move each of them 1 or 2. It's pick one of the 3 and move them 1 space or 0 spaces. So you can use this wild one to choose to not move anyone, basically not doing anything. But that's good if you want to keep them where they are, and so it's especially useful for Jack sometimes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move Sherlock 1 using the wild. Now, Mr. Jack has to make... Oh no, I get to make another move. And now I'm going to move the dog 1, 2, so he can see the blue guy. And now he gets to move Sherlock again, so naturally he moves him so that he can't see into the city. So only my dog could see into the city. Saw the blue guy. He told us he's invisible, so we know it's not the blue guy, because the blue guy was visible. So we narrowed it down once again. However, it's now round 3. So we start again, and we flipped these 4 action tokens in the air, randomized them. So we get 4 randomly of the 8 possible actions. But he's already collected 2 hourglasses. However, so far I've denied him alibi cards to get additional hourglasses that way, so I'll do that again, because I like doing that. And it was useful. The yellow guy flips, same orientation. I know it's not the yellow guy. He just moved Watson to see this way into the city, and he just flipped these 2 tiles for the green lady and the top hat guy. But now I'm forced to move Watson 1 to 2. And either way, he won't be able to see anything. So, he's playing very well. And now, only the green lady can be seen because of the dog again. Mr. Jack is invisible, which means we flip the green lady, we know it's not her. But he gained another hourglass. And now as round 4 starts, he starts the round. And he's starting by flipping the police guy. I'm going to move the dog twice up to the police guy. And I'm going to flip this one like this, since I know he has to move Sherlock 1 or 2. That way, either way, Sherlock will be able to see in. And I'll press the check to confirm it. So now he moves Sherlock 1. So we can see 3 different people. Mr. Jack is invisible, so we narrow down all 3 of them again. So you can see how fast of a game it can be. Now, because it's automated, and because it's the AI, and we're not setting up or taking down, which, granted, doesn't take a lot of time with this game anyway. It's a pretty fast game, very replayable. But even with all my long explanation, you can see how any given game is very quick. Shuffle up the 9 tiles, put out the different various tokens, and you're ready to go. Now it's my turn to start us off, because it's an odd-numbered game. He only needs to be hidden twice more, or survive 3 more rounds. However, I just have to narrow it down once more, but that can be difficult because he's going to try to do everything he can to make it so that both suspects are the same status. Status being visible or invisible. What I'll do is I'm going to rotate this one. Actually, like this. That way. Interesting. Now he's moving Sherlock over there. Oh, just 1. Okay. Darn it. And, yep. So I still have gained nothing. Oh, I might lose this one. He's quite good at staying invisible, the AI. Move him up here. See if I can rotate it next time. A couple of the actions are on more than one side. So he's invisible again, but I didn't learn anything. Okay, it's all or nothing this round. I have to figure out who Jack is for sure. Or he's gonna win. Now this is tricky because this alibi card that I can choose, it is likely, statistically, it's likely to be one that I already know. However, if he takes it, chances are likely that it has an hourglass, which will make him win. I think I lost this one, but that's okay, it's a learning game. And maybe I'm not that good, but that's okay too. There's a little bit of luck in how the turn orders go in comparison to what actions are available and how the tiles are arranged. But that's a very low level of luck. Those are not dramatic randomizers in the sense that if you're very logical and clever, it's not dramatic in how it could shift the game one or another. Just a little light amount of luck, which is common in a lot of well-made Euro games, abstract games, and other types of games too. I don't know how I can make any of the people see one this time. If I make the dog move 1 or 2, it doesn't work. If Sherlock moves 1, it doesn't work. I'll just try the alibi card. Maybe I'll get really lucky. Oh my god, I got really, really lucky. I know who Jack the Ripper is. Now, at the end of the round, it should say I won. However, I did notice that when you play the app, sometimes, I don't know how to toggle this on or off. It plays with a variant that is not, as far as I remember, in the original English rules at least, for the physical version that I have. And the variant works like this. Once you've narrowed it down to 1, and you know who Mr. Jack is, then Mr. Jack can no longer win through the hourglasses. He has to win by surviving all 8 rounds. But it becomes the chase. And it's not enough to narrow it down to 1 at that point. During the chase, you have to make it so that he's visible at the end of a round. I'm not sure if it'll do that variant here or not. I think that's a good variant to do, because I think, if anything, maybe it's slightly harder for Mr. Jack, but I'm not sure about that. Okay, I guess I'll just move Watson. I'll move the dog up 1, hope to rotate it next time. He moves Sherlock over there. So, now he's not visible, but I know who it is. So it's narrowed down to 1. So okay, it is doing the variant. Chase mode starting. In order to win, Jack must remain hidden until the 8th turn. So even though he got his 6 hourglasses, it's not enough because he's not incognito anymore. I know who he is. Now I just have to find him by making him visible to one of the investigators or more at the end of the round. Okay. How to do this? Well, Sherlock's going to move 1 or 2. I'm going to swap these 2. That way, hopefully, it'll do the trick. Oh, and he's going to move Sherlock just the 1. Okay. Yeah, he did exactly the correct move to do in that situation, and I guess I can't blame him. If I was a better thinker, I would have thought that far ahead and been like, no, that won't work. Alright, so I'll just have Watson move up twice. Yep, he's still invisible, but it doesn't affect him for hourglasses, but now it's the final round. It's the 8th round. I have to make him visible, and sure enough, Mr. Jack looks like, Mr. Jack as he's portrayed in media, in this case. Now, by definition, the alibi card can't contain anything helpful, because well, for one thing, it wouldn't narrow it down for me, because it could only be one that's not Mr. Jack, and therefore one that's already flipped. And it wouldn't help him in terms of hourglasses, because since it's chase mode, he can't win by hourglasses anyway. So I got kind of lucky, because I think I might be able to win just by having Sherlock move 1 down and staying put and forcing him to grab the alibi. Yeah, and he'll grab the alibi, but it won't affect him. So they'll say Mr. Jack is visible, and you win by the skin of your teeth, just barely visible. We got it. Whew, that was close. Congratulations, you just reached a new achievement. First win as investigator's medium. That's true, I've only played this easy and hard. I guess I'm one for extremes on the app here. I will share it. I'll do that later. I want to close out this video here. But, well, thanks for watching this playthrough on the app of Mr. Jack Pocket. Maybe it was a little bit helpful. Maybe it was a little bit relaxing. Maybe it was a waste of your time. I don't know. But tell me more about what you'd like to see. Constructive feedback is great. Subscribing and liking is nice and validating. And certainly play the app of Mr. Jack Pocket, but the apps are great, and I like board game apps, but even better is, of course, the physical game, Mr. Jack Pocket. It's a great game. Maybe my favorite two-player abstract game. Certainly favorite two-player deduction abstract game. I guess that narrows it down a lot, though. Thank you very much. Again, this is Michael Eldridge, signing off.